Look, I'm at a loss to know who is advising the Dutton opposition. Peter Dutton is a man of ability, make no mistake about that, and he has excellent insights and splendid values. And yes, you don't want an opposition that just opposes. But at the same time, if you've got a bad government, you have to let the public know what you oppose. As I said yesterday, and I'll keep saying it, why would an opposition give up searching for answers on the Brittany Higgins allegedly $3 million payment? Why would that not be front and centre of everything the opposition prosecutes? It's the same with energy policy. Why do the public not know, as I raised with Matt Canavan last night, whether the opposition are going to go over the cliff with Chris Bowen? Oh, God. Oh, I'm not used to using his Christian name. Over the cliff with Chris Bowen. I mean, are the federal opposition into this net zero rubbish, which the rest of the world is now backing away from? Why doesn't the opposition continue to prosecute the case as to why Qantas was preferred by the Albanese government when Qatar was locked out from increasing their flights to Australia, affecting the price of airfares? Why doesn't the opposition prosecute in detail and regularly the fact that we have industrial relations legislation before the Parliament that's 784 pages with 500 pages of explanatory memorandum? How the hell can anyone digest that? Does the electorate know, as I asked Matt Canavan last night, that it is legislation, it's legislated that Australia must secure 80% of our electricity from renewable energy by 2030. I mean, that's law, 80%. Why isn't that being prosecuted for its stupidity? Because it will fail. Then, as I've said, this pathetic, weak and evasive announcement that there will be an inquiry into Australia's response to the pandemic. The opposition should be shouting from the rooftops that state governments must be made accountable. The terms of reference must be altered to include investigation into the behaviour and responses of state governments. I mean, you've seen those pictures on Daniel Andrews. Shouldn't Daniel Andrews be called to account for this stuff? Give the inquiry the powers of a royal commission. Why is the Albanese government protecting its Labor mates in the States? Why aren't we getting answers as to why these lockdowns occurred with Daniel Andrews and here with Berejiklian? Why were schools closed? Why were the borders shut? Why were businesses denied doing business? Why couldn't you go to the funeral of a relative? Why couldn't you leave your home? Surely you'd be thumping the dispatch box seeking answers and pointing them out. Why did New South Wales people wake up to see uniformed people brandishing guns? And you'd look at Albanese across the dispatch box. Why did you give state governments immunity from the inquiry? Sit down, see what he says. Why isn't this being prosecuted by the federal opposition? And then the takeover of Calvary Hospital by the ACT government seems completely ignored by the federal opposition. And yet the overview of the ACT is in the hands of the federal government. Why aren't they going after the Albanese government on this Calvary issue and the others I've mentioned, thumping the dispatch box and setting themselves up in opposition to this catalogue of failure? Why isn't the federal opposition saying that the notion that the takeover of Calvary Hospital would improve healthcare is a lie? This takeover was part of a broader platform by the Greens and by the abortion providers to expand abortion and euthanasia to all Australian healthcare providers, including those run by religious institutions. Now, of course, there was a grassroots campaign to oppose all this to stop the takeover, but the federal opposition has dropped off. And there is a limit to what the public can do. So the story is, or it's not a national issue, it's ACT story, leave it alone. And the Albanese government is allowed to ignore the issue. Senator Matt Canavan, to whom I spoke last night, wanted an inquiry. The Albanese government ran for cover. Surely this means we've got a government in Canberra which is anti-faith. It seems not to want anyone with a religiously formed conscience to have any place in the public square. Angela Shanahan, writing in the Australian newspaper, said, time and again, despite their denial and the Prime Minister's denial, it is a precedent. If one looks at the history of this, that goes back to 2010, it is easy to see that this is the takeover of Calgary, that is ideologically motivated by an anti-religion and anti-pluralist outlook, masquerading as social policy. So the Calvary Hospital goes, and there's barely a whimper. A Catholic institution, when the Prime Minister says the Catholic faith courses through his veins, but he doesn't attend the funeral of George Pell. There are now signs that there'll be a national crackdown on hospitals that don't provide abortions. Guardian Australia recently reported on how a woman being treated at Melbourne's Mercy Hospital was shocked, quote unquote shocked, during pregnancy complications when she learnt that the hospital would not assist with the termination of her pregnancy because the hospital had a Catholic affiliation. And she said, I was kind of shocked. It's a public hospital and we're a secular country. It didn't make sense. The midwife agreed it was a silly policy, but her hands were tied, unquote. Well, the mother subsequently delivered her baby without complications. She had wanted the pregnancy terminated. Where, will someone tell me, is the federal opposition? The Catholic Church has had a go at this social upheaval. It's Australia's largest religious denomination, the Catholic Church. It tried to mount a campaign against the takeover of Calvary Hospital, but support for religious institutions and religious freedoms in the federal and state Labor governments is almost nil. There's an agenda behind all this. Calvary was a test case, and now it appears successful. What comes next? The opposition's job is to oppose that which is not in the public interest. And all that I have mentioned in this brief editorial highlights the fact that the Albanese government on too many fronts is not acting in the public interest. We need an opposition in the public place with energy and drive like Jacinta Price. Repeat the message. These are things the opposition opposes. Spell them out. Let the public know and then let the public judge. I'll tell you one thing. If you prosecute these cases properly, the public will be clapping their hands and cheering you on.